Uh, to introduce this next lecture, I'll just point out that starting in the 1980s, I got involved in research that eventually I, for myself, discovered that plant-based nutrition was very important to support the engineering and design of life that is coded in DNA. And I developed a series of lectures to try to get across to not only professionals, but the public, that they have been indoctrinated with the drug paradigm that if you got any kind of problem, whether it be physical, mental, or emotional, there's a drug for it. Well, the creative organizing and designing power in the universe put in the plant kingdom the molecules that are required by DNA and cellular synthesis to make bioactive compounds that normalize the function and maximize the function of the human body, all organ systems. I have felt rather frustrated that my minimal efforts have not had a great impact on the earth. However, starting in 2000, the National Geographic Society gave a series of grants to Dan Buettner. And these grants, I think it was 5 in number, were to find places on Earth where people had longevity, living up to the 90s and 100 and above independently and in good health. And he found them. And the first ones that came out, there are common denominators of these areas that are called blue zones. And number one is a high plant-based diet with low or no meat. And if it's meat, it's primarily fish, but you don't have to cut out anything totally, but high plant, low meat, and body activity. And we're talking about areas that they identified that were people living primitively without electricity and gasoline motors. And if they moved, they walked. And if they got anything done, they labored. And so it wasn't going to a gymnasium to get their exercise. It was part of the daily life. But in addition, there were other things like healthy lifestyle. But one of the key things they found out was a purpose in life as you get older. And in Buettner's book, first one that he wrote, now the National Geographic Society now has 5 books plus a TV segment on Netflix. They have their own TV station. They've done 2 segments in their journal that goes to all libraries, all on these blue zone characteristics. But in this book by Buettner, he emphasizes more than anything else a purpose in life, because he says if you have a purpose in life with your family, your neighbors, your community, you will seek a better diet, you will exercise, you will have a good lifestyle that is not unhealthy if you have a good purpose in life. And he emphasized interaction with your family members and generations and your nurses. Yeah, they're not your nurses, but your health people too, your neighbors. And he really emphasized that the individuals participating in community activities, including churches, were very important to add to this purpose in life, which will influence your decisions on the common denominators to actually do those things. So throughout history, there's been a search for the fountains of youth, and it's very interesting that the finding actually what to do for longevity and good health is in your own kitchen and your own choices of what kind of food to eat. So I'm going to share some of the information about the National Geographic and its grants to Dan Buettner about the blue zones. Thank you. I think probably it's worthwhile to say, where did the term blue zones come from? And when Dan Buettner first started out with his grants from the National Geographic Society, one of the first areas he found out was the island of Sardinia to the west of Italy in the Mediterranean Sea, that there was a professor from one of the universities in Italy that had already been studying the population up in the mountains. And he pointed out that the lifestyle and activity of these people had not changed much since Roman times. As I have mentioned before, they didn't have electricity, they didn't have gasoline motors, they used their bodies, and they lived off the land. It was primarily a plant diet with low meat, and they had a lot of activity. But the professor said, up in the mountains, you just can't believe how blue the sky is. And so Dan Buettner adopted this term blue zones as he continued his grants that started out in the year 2000. And finally, he got a grant from the National Institute of Health of Aging in 2021. And I'll talk to you about the book he's put together about the blue zones. As I mentioned, that he found this island of Sardinia was the first one. And he points out in his book that Dr. Keyes and Dr. Kane from the University of Minnesota in the public health department pointed out in their research with Danish twins in 1996 that hereditary, the genes of your parents have no more than about a fourth of the impact of on your health, and that the environment and what's going on where you live is about 3/4 of the impact on longevity and quality of your health. And that unfortunately, medicine had put a whole lot more emphasis on genetics than they did on things that you actually have some control over. And actually, he pointed out that by your choices of your and you make on your diet and your daily activities have more impact on your quality of life and health than the genes from your parents. And so that the environment was one of the most important things in aging and in health. It was one of the first things that Buettner discovered. Now, here is a photograph of him, and I think it's interesting that he points out that he's got his hand on a bicycle there, and different areas that have tried to incorporate some of the common denominators of the blue zones have set up areas in cities where you had to have either a scooter or a bicycle to get in and out of rather than use cars or public transportation so that you'd work your muscles. And that we had mentioned before that this professor, Gani, Giannipes, from the University of Caesarea in Italy, and he shared with Buettner about the blue skies of Sardinia. And if you'll notice, even the cover of his book has got a blue background, which he brings up over and over again. Now, this is a picture from Sardinia because National Geographic is very high in its use of photographs in its magazines ever since the black and white days. And this, as I pointed out earlier, that the people living in the mountains of Sardinia are living much like in Roman times. So that's nearly 2,000 years ago, and that there are no modern food or physical assistant devices. And this professor kept going on about how blue the sky was up there. And so Buettner developed this term for finding these areas of longevity and good health as blue zones. And one of the common denominators is a lot of home cooking, that they cooked a lot of natural plant ripened vegetables grown in their garden. And this, having a garden of all these different blue zones was a common denominator. And the importance of this garden is that you don't pick the fruits and vegetables when they're green so they can be shipped. You allow them to mature on the plant so that the genes in the plant can put the nutrients in the produce that the DNA and the chromosomes of the human require to hook together in cellular synthesis to make bioactive molecules to optimize the biochemistry of life. And also these home cooked foods are high in fiber and rich in nutrients because they are allowed to mature on the plant. And it's also relatively low calorie, lots of nutrition with not a lot of calories that can be shunted into storage for fat. Now, in all the blue zones, daily activity is important. And it seems that exercise that's common to the environment, of walking over hills to herd sheep, goats, cows, also fishing, working in the garden, which was 100% of these blue zones, and bike transportation was much more common than wide roads or automobiles. In other words, narrow bike trails. So activity was one of the common denominators of the blue zones, in addition to plant-based diet. Now, another factor that they found out in the blue zones was high intensity of human relationships. And this is one of the pictures from Buettner's book showing spontaneous dancing after a meal where multiple generations were sitting and eating food that had been produced locally, and it's not processed food, and a lot of spontaneity and activity in the relationships of families and neighbors. Also, the people in the blue zones had personal hobbies and activities like quilting and crocheting. And here we see example of beekeeping, and particularly in Okinawa, basket weaving was a common thing of groups getting together. That the important thing was interpersonal relationships with other people was a common denominator in the blue zones. Now, this is an example of what he was saying in the families. There is a centenarian at the head of the table with a cap on, and here he has three generations of the family sitting around having a joint meal. And this was a common denominator of these different blue zones. That as people got older, they developed good relationships with all generations of their family, and they got together on a regular basis to have plant-based diets primarily, and food from their gardens. This is a 100-year-old gentleman, and this is his granddaughter that is hugging him. And this touching is a communication that is important in human activities, or to add to having enjoying life. And in these blue zones, nearly all of them have no rest homes. The centenarians live with one of their generations, usually of their daughter or their son, and they come in contact with their grandchildren and develop love and interaction. And you can look at the face of the little girl and the face of the centenarian here, that these are happy people. And that's an important thing in blue zones, is happiness. Now, this is just an example that not only are there islands and isolated peninsulas where the what I would say French fried franchises don't go where there's low population. And here is an example of a guy that's coming up a hill herding sheep. And this is a common thing that in all the blue zones, walking was a very common thing, not having various motor-driven vehicles that also not only shepherding animals, but fishing was a stressful daily activity in these blue zones. And here is another example of what these blue zones would be: a snack that's primarily nuts, of different types of nuts, because the genes in the plants that are responsible for the different tastes and the appearance and the colors of nuts are providing different types of molecules that in the digestive process are made available to the genes controlling cellular synthesis to make optimal bioactive molecules. And one of the common criticisms of a plant-based diet is that fatty acids and omega-3s are not as common in the plants as, say, in meat. However, if you have nuts of different types in your diet, you'll find out that the nuts have omega-3s and fatty acids, and that particularly walnuts and Brazil nuts are very high in these fatty acids. And also that nuts tend as a snack to be filling. And so you don't just eat with a coming appetite, as we used to say as a kid. You just seem to want more and more snacking between meals. And what you would like to do is to reduce the number of calories and increase the amount of nutrients that are provided in your foodstuff. Here is a good example of fruits and vegetables in the blue zones. And then one of the first things that should strike you about this is the different colors. And it's a very old but meaningful statement that mothers and grandmothers have made, that I grew up hearing, is that, quote, if you want to be healthy, eat different colors of fruits and vegetables, because the different colors and the different tastes are due to different types of nutrient molecules that are in the fruits and vegetables and berries. And you can really see a broad appearance of colors in this photograph, which is from Dan Buettner's book. Now, you can see here that I mentioned before that some of the municipalities and those that have become aware of the blue zones, that physical exercise is so important. So in Singapore, they have taken areas in the downtown area that you got to get there, you got to go by bicycle, that you have to park your vehicle off in the distance to enforce activity and use of your muscles that are important organ in the body that contributes to good health. Now, one of the first blue zones that I became aware of, it's a long story, but it was Okinawa. And after World War II, there were multiple third world nations that had their entire population with National Health Service. And that was true of Japan. And Okinawa is the biggest island of Japan. And they discovered of all the nations that had this kind of information that Japan, people were living longer than any place else. And when they went to look at it even closer, they found out that mainland the land Japanese were just about like the other countries, but Okinawa was very different. And one of the things they had in Okinawa is this MOAI. And MOAI is social groups that get together, donating and giving interactions. And one of the very interesting things of Okinawa is that it's a female-dominated society, and the women would get together once a month, and everybody would make a donation to a central pool, and then they would decide who in the community is most deserving and needs financial assistance, and they would all give the money, and they called it MOAI, to that individual, which is a community sharing event. Also in Okinawa, there was an old, they attributed it to ancient Chinese, that they called it Hara Hachiba. And that's a mantra that you do not eat until you feel full and stuffed, that you stop eating when you're about 80% full. And this, they say, reduces the incidence of gastrointestinal symptoms that is so common in more developed countries, particularly where you have more fried food, and the servings are excessive, and you just eat till you're about to food come out your ears, and that is not healthy. And another thing in Okinawa, they had this IKIGAL, ECHO, and this means finding a purpose in life, interacting with others, such as the family, your neighbors, your community, your religion, and social groups. And they're very highly developed in Okinawa. And Buettner, in his book about Blue Zone, emphasizes this last aspect, that IKIGAL, is so important. Finding a purpose in life is essential, because unless you have a purpose in life, you will not discipline yourself to not overeat, that you will discipline yourself to have exercise, that you will discipline yourself to have a healthy lifestyle, that you will rest and work hard in a balance that produces a active mind and a body that feels good. And it apparently this purpose in life, one of the key function of the brain is the mind. And now there are books written about how the mind influences all the organs of the body, even the gene expression, and that to have a positive outlook on life and a purpose in life is so important for the entire search for longevity and to have good health while you have it. Now, this is very important. One of the blue zones is Loma Linda, which is east of Los Angeles, California, and it's not an island or an isolated peninsula. And this group there in this blue zone is about 30,000 Adventist church members that utilize guidance from the Old Testament in terms of how you should live. It's involved with their church, and particularly the story in Daniel, the first 1 to 12 verses are worth reading about when the Jews were in Babylonia and King Nebuchadnezzar wanted the young Jewish boys that looked so muscular and so robust to be in his service. And he invited them to be sure and come in and eat at the king's table, to have the finest food and wines from the nation. And they said, no, we don't want that. We want a plant-based diet with water. And he said, oh, no, I want you to have the best. So they did a little test there, they tell you in the Bible, and they found out that the Jewish boys on vegetables and water had more endurance, more strength. And so they came to a relationship that they would allow them to have the diet that they wanted. And of course, the Jewish community was built around the church, their religious activity, which is more in the home than in the temple, as I understand. And all of this for the Jews as well as for the Seventh-day Adventists is part of the purpose in life, which Buettner emphasizes in his book more than some of the first things that were published in the Geographic magazine. They were just telling you the common denominators, but he says you will not pursue the common denominators unless you have that purpose in life. And that's, again, very important in this book. And he has pictures in his book of religious services that different groups follow. And this one, I think, is either Episcopal or Catholic, but it doesn't matter that the church relationships that have activities for all ages, and there's a lot of meaningful human contact. It contributes significantly to a purpose in life, according to Buettner, which you don't find in some of the other activities that talk about the blue zones. Now, this is a very interesting photograph because it's what they've done in Singapore. And they point out in this book that their government is, they describe it as draconian. They enforce the blue zones into the downtown area where you see the skyscrapers in the background. Well, they developed lakes around and green areas where people could meditate and be next to nature. And one of the things they found out is that they did some surveys, and they found out that the life expectancy in Singapore was about 35 years less than, say, Okinawa and some of these blue zones. So they enforced changes in the environment to try to reduce the urban modern city. And to get into those skyscrapers, you got to use bicycles and park your vehicle in parking lots at the distance to even get in there. And then you have these ponds with, you see here, with natural flowers and trees to try to bring to the people a sense of nature. Now, this is a picture from Buettner's book that emphasizes something that I was not aware of, but there are people that never weigh themselves. And they point out in this book that people that weigh themselves on a regular basis, that they tend to weigh 17 pounds less than those that never weigh. And each day, if you weigh yourself, you can plan their calorie intake for the day. And it's a whole lot easier to lose 1 or 2 pounds than to all of a sudden find out you're 15 or 20 pounds too heavy and start trying to get down to a more desirable distribution of muscles and fat storage in your body. So one of the things you can do in your home in a modernization of trying to find the blue zone is having a bathroom scale and weighing yourself on a regular basis. Maybe every morning you could plan, if you gain 2 or 3 pounds, I'm going to eat less today. And those that don't weigh tend to weigh 17 pounds more. And that's just excess weight that your body has to carry around, and it's not healthy. Now, one of the things they point out that nearly everybody makes some New Year's resolutions, or either you go to a doctor and he gives you some advice and you say you're going to increase your exercise and you're going to modify your diet. But in less than 2 years, do you find out that individuals have followed through with their New Year resolutions or doing what their doctor advised them to do? Less than 5% of people are compliant 24 months later after resolutions or physician's advice. So the personal decision or choice is not near as effective as if you have an environment in which the blue zone common denominators are present. And this is one of the things that National Geographic and Buettner are emphasizing, that you've got to change the environment for where you're living rather than making personal decisions, because human beings are bad about following through. In some of these blue zones, people didn't decide to do these things that were healthy. It was just, that's the only way you can live there, is because, as I say, they don't have electricity, they don't have gasoline motors, and it's their physical activity that in this area, and it was the environment rather than the decisions. Now, all of this has come together that some of the civic leaderships in major companies and food sources, much like I told you about have happened in Singapore, rather than force it on the population, as done in Singapore by edict, they are trying to change things in different cities. And they have, in the United States, they did a survey of, I think it was about 175 cities, and they put out multiple points. Is this present or absent in your city? And in response to this, these cities have put together forbidden auto zones in the central district, that you got to either walk or use a bicycle or a scooter to get there, that they have put bicycle trails and scooter trails are added to the city. They have gone to the restaurants and the grocery stores and tried to figure out things that they can do there to emphasize the diet and the choice of foods for the blue zones. In fact, at some grocery stores, if you're choosing foods that are used commonly in the blue zones, they have special checkout accelerated areas where you don't have to stay in as long a line. And there are restaurants that not only stop smoking, but have a portion of their menu that are blue zone choices of food. And again, the choices of the food is high nutrient content, but low calorie. In other words, frequently you're told to lay off of the bread and pastries and cookies and cakes and pies, where there's a lot of calorie in the sweeteners of the sugar, but not as high in nutrient value. And also in some of these cities, they've gone to a point to develop social support systems to organize people in groups to do things together. And 72 American cities have adopted, through their city councils and their major businesses, the goal to develop blue zones in the environment to promote healthy lifestyles and healthy diets. And one of the big points that have been found over and over again, that burning tobacco and sucking it into your lungs is one of the worst things and lifestyles you can do that will cancel and negate very positive things for good health. And so they have tried to develop more and more businesses and restaurants that don't allow smoking. And then they have developed things that you ought to try to do in your home to promote the blue zones. And what they've also found out is that in these blue zones, is a compliant family can save money in these inflationary times, which is not something to be ignored. Now, also, I didn't mention that except smoking and abusing alcohol is another thing that is really deleterious to your health, that they found out in the blue zones. And I didn't mention that in these cities they've tried to, through television and the various public communications, downgrade junk food and try to improve human interrelations with workplaces and establish social networks where men or women get together and do things together in the way of crafts and habits in nature, and that there should be more focus in the home, and that there should be more efforts to promote meditation, prayer, writing, and music. Music is also something that is very healthy to the body. And the book by Buettner goes into several pages about things you can do in the home. One of them that I just got to showing you was the scales to weigh frequently, if not daily, is health promoting. And they feel like that there should not be a television in the children's room or even in bedrooms, that it should be a TV in a common area where everybody gets together, and you shouldn't eat where the TV is, because you can get involved in the TV and you don't even realize you're overeating, and that is not healthy. And they, in the home, they urge to get hand tools rather than machine-driven, say, snow plows, that rakes and shovels and edgers and mowers that you push are health promoting. That everybody should try to find a plot to maintain a family garden and to eat food that is ripening on the plant so that the genes in the plant can put the nutrient molecules that your DNA calls for in cellular synthesis. But they also point out that if you get a dog and you care for it and you actually train it and interact with the dog, that this is health promoting, and it also gives you exercise. And it's an interaction with another living creature, which is important in the activity of the brain, which is the mind, to have interaction with other living creatures. Now, a good example is Fort Worth, Texas, that had adopted the Blue Zone action. And when they did the original survey, they were number 185 out of 190 in terms of rating their Blue Zone actions within the being present within the city. Well, in 4 years, with the things that they decided to do, they jumped from 185 to number 58 on this criteria of the survey that has been done in the United States. And they increased the budgets for the parks. They put in 87 miles of bike lanes. They worked with the major businesses to have rest areas where people get away from their workplace and can just relax. Same way with promoting this in the schools, and that they got the restaurants to develop Blue Zone menus, and in the grocery stores in Fort Worth, they developed checkout lanes that were accelerated to promote Blue Zone choices of food. And they claimed that it was a 31% reduction in smoking of the population, and 62% had more physical activities. And one of the things they did is develop running clubs for all ages and to promote using flower beds and part of the land around the home to have gardens and having plant the seeds and eat the fruit and vegetables that ripen on the vine. But this just shows that you can change the environment. Is more reliable than personal ideas of trying to follow the blue zones, that if the environment's changed, that it's more successful. So the bookends, again, that I have emphasized, that you don't have to move to an island or a primitive peninsula in a third world country. And Loma Linda, California is proof that in a urban society, you can foster the things of the blue zones. And that's why these different cities are trying to implement and get people and businesses and restaurants and grocery stores to change, where the personal choices follow their environment. And of course, the Singapore by edict has done a major change for the longevity and the quality of life for their citizens, but they're trying to do that by choices in the cities in the United States. Also, I would like to point out that aloe mannin, which is acetylated mannose, is a phytonutrient that is present in the dietary supplement that I've been working with now for 39 years, that it provides lower missing nutrients for the family diet in the United States. And one of the real important examples there is that we do not tend to eat cruciferous vegetables, which have a sulfur group in them that is kind of a bite. You can't force children to eat Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli, turnips, and even adults don't tend to get them. But the key amino acid in there is cysteine. And this we put in the dietary supplement New Eden to try to foster some of the plant-based nutrient molecule supplies for your nutrition. And this we have found out generates stem cells, which migrate out in the blood from your own bone marrow and replace aged and damaged cells. And a new stem cell comes in and differentiates just like in the embryo and renews the function of organs. We have also found out that the aloe mannin lengthens telomeres. And this is one of the things that the plant-based diet apparently supports, because the gold standard for research now for anti-aging research is lengthening of telomeres. And we're doing a study that indicates that telomeres are elongated by this key ingredient that is in New Eden dietary supplement. And there's a challenge about the exercise in our environment, but if you walk equivalent to about 3 miles a week and develop a purpose in life, that these are very important to add to the common denominators of the blue zones. And again, Buettner says that developing a purpose in life is probably more important than any other single thing, because it drives your unconscious and conscious mind to do those things that are common denominators in the blue zones, because you're enjoying your relationship in the years you're spending as you get older, rather than complaining about aching joints and pains, etc. And your friends that have not followed the blue zone are no longer around, but it's taking advantage of the younger people in your family and developing relationships with them and working together with other older people in the social groups that add together to give you a purpose in life, which Buettner really emphasizes. Well, that's the end of this lecture, and I hope that it resonates with you to make some personal decisions that are healthy and add to years of good life.